One of the biggest changes in ICE 3.0 is around licensing. We kind of went through this license transformation in, I believe, late version of 1.x. But now, in order to align with Cisco DNA licensing, I guess Cisco has once again redone the ICE licensing. If you are already familiar with the ICE 2.x, you know that the core ICE licenses are Base Plus and Apex. And we kind of covered that pretty extensively back in our ICE 2.2 video. And just to aid my explanation, let me bring up some visual for you. So here, this is a table that I've created to provide a quick comparison between the ICE 2.x and the 3.0. This is the same table pretty much that we used back in the ICE 2.2 video series. And the major changes, other than the fact that the licensing are now called Essential, Advantage, and Premier as opposed to Base Plus and Apex. Let me point some of those out for you. First of all, they become what they call a tier licenses, meaning that the higher tier, in this case, the highest tier is Premier, even though I have it kind of upside down. The Premier, which is the higher tier, licenses includes all of the features from the lower tiers. All right, unlike the Base, the Plus, and the Apex, where each kind of provides their own certain sets of features. So in this case, for example, Essential being the lowest tier. So when you get Essential, you get all these features. But when you buy the Advantage, you get all these features in addition to everything in Essential. And then for the Premier, you get everything in this table, right? Or I guess I shouldn't say the table, but Essential plus the Advantage. So that is the first key difference. The second is the fact that the Base Perpetual has now become Essential Subscription. As you can see right there under the term column, Base used to be Perpetual, but moving forward, the Essential will become a subscription-based license. There are also some features that gets moved around between the tier, and I kind of have it highlighted them here. Okay, so just to make the reference a little bit easier, I've color coded it. For example, the TrustSec that used to be available in the Base and now has been moved into Advantage. And the passive ID that used to be in the Plus is now moved to the Essential. And then the more advanced security, I would say, or at least as what Cisco consider advanced security, which are the Adaptive Network Control, ANC, as well as the Rapid Threat Containment. Those has been moved under the Premier. Everything else in the table kind of remains the same, but let's go through them in more detail anyway. First of all, ICE by default comes with 90-day evaluation right out of the box. It's nothing that you have to do. You don't have to contact Cisco or anything, as you will see in a second in our lab as well. Once it's installed, you get 90 days for you to play with all the features available. Unless you plan to continue to use the eval license for testing purposes in your lab, you will need to purchase proper licenses, and these depends on the features that you plan to use in your deployment. And here are the detailed breakdown of the ICE licenses. For the Essential license, and again, like I said, this is equivalent to the legacy base. Now we call the Base Plus license the legacy license. This is the license that will enable the basic ICE features functionality for user visibility as well as the enforcement. And this includes the basic AAA.1x, guest services, passive ID. Although it's not clear on the Cisco documentation right now, but I believe the MACsec and the ICE API is still included under the Essential. You can purchase Essential in a 1, 3, or 5-year subscription. The way that the license is consumed is based on the concurrent radius session. So to figure out how many licenses that you need, you will need to know the expected maximum number of endpoints you expect to be authenticated and connected to your network at a time, because it's based on concurrent session. And this is not by the total number of the endpoints you have. Okay, just because let's say you have 5,000 PCs doesn't mean that all 5,000 connects and be online at the same time and seen by ICE. So the number is usually lower than that. I say the endpoints because this can be either user endpoint like computer, the mobile device, or a non-user endpoint like printers, access point, IP phone, and you name it, right? Especially the IoT devices. That tends to stay on 24/7. So take those into consideration. Then for the Advantage license that you will get, and that's equivalent of the Base and the Plus combined, right? If you need to implement feature like Cisco PX Grid, the profiling and feed, TrustSec, MSC integration for location services, BYOD, and I believe the ACI integration is still there too, then you're going to need to purchase the Advantage license. And again, like I mentioned, you get everything from the Essential as well. So it's all inclusive of Essential. Unlike the Base and the Plus, you do not need to purchase Essential in order to use the Advantage feature. With the Base and the Plus has a dependency on the Base, but that is no longer the case for the Advantage. Right, which means that the radio session that matches the Advantage features based on the authorization policy rule will consume the Advantage license. Right, and that's based on one of these features that you turn on in the authorization policy rule. One of the popular features that requires an Advantage is profiling, I would say. Right, because if you plan to authenticate your non-user devices based on the device type, like an IP phone, for example, the chances are the device will be online all the time and always consume the Advantage license. So you have to account for that for the entire time, unlike the user device that can come and go. So make sure that you account for these endpoints appropriately, the non-user endpoint. Same deal for the subscription terms, 1, 3, or 5 years. For the Premier license, which is equivalent to Base, Plus, and Apex combined, it gives you the more advanced enforcement feature set, I would say, and they are the Rapid Threat Containment, Adaptive Network Control, the Posture Assessment, the MDM integration, and the Threat-Centric NAC. Premier is inclusive of Essential and Advantage, and has the same subscription term, 1, 3, and 5. So one clarification that I want to make is that these licenses are not mutually exclusive. Right, just because you purchase a Premier doesn't mean that you cannot have the Essential or the Advantage. And you can have them all pretty much installed on your ICE deployment in varying quantity based on your authentication needs. Right, the calculation is just going to be a little different since each license tier is pretty much self-contained. So if you have, for example, an endpoint that consumes a Premier, that endpoint would not consume Advantage or Essential, right? Unlike the legacy license where an endpoint that consumed the Apex also potentially consume Plus and Base at the same time, depending on if they use combined feature or not. But since the Premier already contained the feature from the Essential and the Advantage, it only consumed Premier. Moving down the table a little bit, AnyConnect license does not really fall under ICE license, so it is often overlooked. You need AnyConnect Apex if you plan to use posture assessment features, and I don't believe this has changed with ICE 3.0, although it wouldn't surprise me if Cisco also rebrand the AnyConnect Apex into a Premier or something tomorrow. Again, just to line up with the DNA licensing scheme. The license basically entitles you to use the AnyConnect VPN client with the ICE posture module when you want to do posture assessment specifically using ICE. If you already have purchased AnyConnect Apex as part of your existing AnyConnect VPN deployment, then you are good to go. Otherwise, you also need to purchase this license as part of your ICE licensing order. Okay? But for this, just because the license may change, definitely check the latest licensing guide to make sure that there's no new changes to this. So these are what I considered ICE core licenses. There are also other ICE licenses available which you may or may not need. And the next one is the TACX, and just the name suggests it's for TACX features. And FYI, this license has been renamed from Device Administration or Device Admin, and now it's become TACX, I guess just to make it a little bit more obvious. If you want to enable TACX support, and by the way, it is also perpetual, so that's a good thing. That doesn't change from the previous version. As you see there, it remains perpetual. But unlike the ACS license, if you are migrating from the ACS, that requires a large license. When you exceed the 500 devices, ICE doesn't have that concept. So you can pretty much have as many devices you want as part of the TACX authentication. It will be all covered just under the TACX license. You need one TACX license per ICE node that you plan to have the device admin service enable. What this means is if you have a brand new ICE deployment Now with the 2 TACX node, then you would need 2 of these licenses. All right, this concept of per node licensing was introduced back in ISE 2.4, where prior to that, you only need to buy 1 device admin license for the entire deployment, regardless of how many ISE nodes are running TACX. But if you are upgrading from a version prior to 2.4 and already have device admin license, and this is also true if you go from anything prior to 2.4 to anything after 2.4, so that includes 2.4, 2.6, 2.7, not just the 3.0. Right, if you are migrating, then what you can do is to reach out to Cisco if you already have purchased the device admin license and have them honor the per deployment support by giving you, I believe it's a 50, last I checked, device admin license, and that's basically covers as many as the ISE node you can have in a deployment. Right, so that should be plenty. Then we have the IPsec license, and that's for when you want to secure communication between the PSN and the network access device using IPsec. Then you need this per PSN for up to 150 tunnels for each PSN. I personally don't come across this usage for this a lot, so I wouldn't imagine it being very common, but just FYI, that is also available. I am not going to cover the ICE pick or pick upgrade, as I don't even see them available in a 3.0 anymore, at least in the FCS. So you can see right there, I leave them blank. There's a good chance that the pick or ICE pick will no longer be supported in 3.0. Right? But just FYI, if you're in the 2.x, then there's an equivalent or the corresponding licenses right there. Evaluation we have already covered. You get 90 days up to 100 endpoints with all the features available. And then lastly, the virtual machine. So if you decide to go with the VM appliance like we do in this lab, you're also going to need to buy the VM license. Prior to 2.4, this was just a generic license that can be used for any size VM, but as of 2.4 and continue into 3.0, this has become size specific, being small, medium, and large, which maps to the physical appliance size of the 3615, 55, and 95 respectively. So if you have a new deployment now, and again, it's not just applicable to 3.0, it's actually started in 2.4, so anything 2.4, 2.6, 2.7, you're going to need to purchase or procure somehow the license with the correct size. If you, again, upgrading from the version prior to 2.4, you can reach out to Cisco, and Cisco will basically convert those licenses you already have into a medium-sized VM for you. Okay, and that's because the chances are you're not going to have the large size, because the large size or the 3695s just got introduced, I believe, after 2.4. So now let's talk about how you can buy these licenses. For a brand new implementation, you have a few ways to get these licenses. Number one, you can buy them separately at the quantity of your choosing. So you need to figure out how many of the licenses do you need for whether it's Essential, Advantage, or Premier, and just buy them a la carte. Option number two, if you buy Cisco Catalyst switches or wireless access point with DNA subscription, they may also comes with some core licenses already, and I'm not going to name them just because it can change anytime. Just check the latest ordering guide. For those, from the type of licenses you would get, as well as the quantity for each switch or AP that you purchase. But you're only going to get the Essential, Advantage, or Premier though for the most part. Everything else down below, you're still going to need to purchase them separately. Again, you want to check with Cisco for their latest offerings. And the last option, which is increasing in popularity, is to go with the enterprise agreement, and that basically gives you everything. Okay, so everything that you see here, if your company is assigned the EA with Cisco, then you will have access to all these licenses. Now for the brownfield, where it can get a little bit more complicated, if you are upgrading from 2.x that already use smart licensing, then what you need to do is to perform a license conversion on your smart account before you perform the ICE server upgrade, right? And then you probably going to end up having to re-register ICE also to your smart account after the upgrade. But if you are upgrading from the 2.x and still uses the traditional licenses, which means that when you install the license originally, use the pack file as opposed to register your ICE to the smart license server, because 3.0 requires smart license, you're first going to need to convert your legacy licenses or traditional licenses to smart license, and then follow the same procedure as the previous scenario, which is performing the license conversion on your smart account. Because 3.0 is so new, it's literally, I would say, 2 weeks old at the time of this recording. I can't even tell you what the process looks like exactly. So, or how the legacy licenses gets mapped to the new licenses in terms of quantity. So you might want to reach out to your Cisco account team or support to get more information on that. So a couple of recommendations I have for you guys. Overall, I would recommend you always get some Premier licenses. It used to be Apex, but now it becomes Premier, even though you may think that you do not need some of these features today. And the reason for that, because once you install either the Essential or the Advantage licenses, you may no longer have access to those features offered by the Premier. In fact, the menu options for those might not even be displayed on the GUI, so you will see like a chunk of menu missing when you don't have those license installed. So you can always buy a bare minimum also, which I believe is, if it's still 100, used to be 100 with the Plus and the Apex. You might want to check on the Advantage and the Premier. But the point is, you can buy the bare minimum, and that way you always have the feature available if you need to test anything. And lastly, as a reminder, if you're upgrading from the 2.3 or older and has the device admin or VM licenses, then make sure to contact Cisco to get the migrated license beforehand and have them in your smart accounts, as ICE will generate license warning without them in 2.4 onwards. So to prevent getting the licensing warning, make sure you have all those ready to go in your smart account. For more information regarding the licensing and ordering, you can check out the Cisco ICE ordering guide as well as the ICE 3.0 license FAQ page on the Cisco website.